Kalorama, a recorded books hybrid imprint, presents Coup d'etat, exposing deep state treason and the plan to reelect President Trump, by Jerome R. Corsi, read by Jerome R. Corsi. Dedicated to my attorneys, David Gray and Larry Klayman, whose expert professional legal advice was indispensable in my successful fight to prevent Mueller from indicting and imprisoning me, a fate that would have silenced me and prevented me from writing this book. Now, free of Mueller's corrupt investigation, I am silent no more. While praying the traitors are brought to justice, we pray God's will be done. In the end, God always wins. Introduction. This is perhaps the most important book I have ever written. It is one I never imagined I would have to write. In these pages, I present shocking evidence that the Obama administration used false allegations secretly sourced from opposition research written by foreign operatives that was funded by Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign and by the Democratic National Committee to launch a Justice Department counterintelligence espionage investigation against Donald Trump, the GOP's presidential candidate. The counterintelligence operation was extended into the first year of Donald Trump's presidency, at which time the Justice Department also launched a criminal case. The DOJ only closed the counterintelligence and criminal investigations against the president when the Mueller Office of Special Counsel failed to result in indictments in March 2019. The truth is that the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and then President Barack Obama orchestrated a deep state coup d'etat designed to prevent Donald Trump from being elected president. When that failed and Trump won the election, the Clinton-Obama team morphed the Justice Department counterintelligence operation into a coup d'etat aimed at impeaching Trump. To be specific, by deep state, I mean those legacy employees in the federal government, especially those in the CIA, the National Security Agency, NSA, the Office of the Directorate of National Intelligence, as well as the DOJ and the FBI, who opposed Donald Trump on partisan political grounds. These bureaucrats, loyal to the globalist appeal of leftist policies espoused by Hillary Clinton in her 2016 presidential run, took it upon their own authority first to conspire to deny Donald Trump the presidency, and then, once Trump surprised them by winning the election, to remove him from office by impeachment or through the provisions of the 25th Amendment for the removal of the president. As I demonstrate in chapter after chapter, the Obama administration intelligence agencies, including the CIA and the NSA, along with the Obama administration federal justice system, including both the Department of Justice acting in a prosecutorial capacity and the FBI acting in an investigative capacity, conspired to commit numerous criminal miscarriages of justice, including fabrications of evidence and suborning of perjury, to portray Trump as a Russian agent, or failing that, as a guilty party determined to block a Justice Department criminal investigation. In the end, obstruction of justice charges against Trump emerged out of the failed Office of Special Counsel's counterintelligence investigation. When the Office of Special Counsel under Robert Mueller failed to produce any evidence of Trump or his campaign being involved in alleged Russian collusion to defeat Hillary Clinton in 2016, Mueller went public with a statement that attempted to encourage Congress to begin impeachment hearings over allegations that Trump had obstructed Mueller's investigation. In doing so, Mueller disregarded the conclusion of Attorney General William Barr that the instances of possible obstruction of justice did not meet the probable cause threshold needed to seek indictments against President Trump or his close associates. At the time of this writing, hate Trumpers of the Clinton-Obama hard left are continuing their efforts to remove Trump from office by launching impeachment hearings conducted by Representative Jerry Nadler, Democrat, New York, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and by Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat, California. When Mueller's appearance before the House Judiciary Committee failed to achieve Nadler's goal to support a House vote to begin impeachment hearings, Schiff took over as the anti-Trump deep state conspirators morphed Russiagate into Ukrainegate. Substituting Ukraine for Russia, Schiff pursued the claim that President Trump had threatened to withhold foreign aid from Ukraine unless Ukraine's newly elected president, Vladimir Zelensky, cooperated with Trump in digging up dirt in Ukraine on former Vice President Joe Biden, then a leading candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. I will show in this book that the fingerprints of foreign intelligence agencies, including most importantly British intelligence, were all over perhaps the greatest political scandal in American history, alternatively characterized as Russiagate and Spygate, and now Ukrainegate. Never before in our history has one political party made such serious criminal efforts to defeat the presidential candidate of the opposing political party. When that failed, the Democrats and their deep state conspirators refocused their criminal efforts to deny a duly elected president the constitutional right to assume the powers and duties of that office without unrelenting threats of impeachment. I am in a particularly good position to write this book because I experienced firsthand the partisan, hate Trump political nature of Mueller's Office of Special Counsel investigation. My mission here is to expose the hard left, making it clear that in their ideological zeal, deep state, quote, patriots, end quote, in 2016 engaged in treasonous crimes designed to pull off a coup d'etat aimed at removing Trump from the presidency. Clinton failed, Mueller failed. Now, with the help of God, the deep state will also fail. That is why I am writing this book. Chapter 1. Deep State Treason. The central premise of this book is that deep state actors operating as senior officers in the U.S. intelligence agencies, including the CIA and the U.S. justice system, with both the FBI and the Department of Justice involved, engaged in a coup d'etat designed to make sure Donald Trump lost the presidential election in 2016. In the unlikely event Trump might be elected, the deep state conspirators morphed their efforts into impeachment strategy as an insurance policy. The insurance policy was designed to make sure Trump would be removed from office either through impeachment or by his being declared mentally incompetent under the auspices of the 25th Amendment. What distinguishes this analysis is not only my first-hand experience with the Mueller investigation, but the years of investigative reporting I have devoted to uncovering and exposing criminal governmental misconduct. Donald Trump's candidacy and election have set off in America's political left an intense hatred, often described as Trump derangement syndrome. In the pages of this book, I seek to prove that unelected bureaucrats in the nation's justice and intelligence agencies acted on their personal political preferences to weaponize law enforcement in a conscious effort to go outside the law to destroy the presidential candidate of the Republican Party. I will argue that in their zeal, these unelected officials used the powers of the federal government to subvert the Constitution, hatching what has become a treasonous coup d'etat aimed at removing Donald Trump from the presidency, Despite no evidence, Donald Trump has committed any high crime or misdemeanor that would warrant his removal from office. Hillary Clinton's defeat in the 2016 presidential election came as a devastating and unanticipated shock to those on the hard left, including those in the United States federal bureaucracy who had expected her to win. The expectation of the hard left was that 8 years under a Hillary Clinton presidency would advance, if not complete, the fundamental transformation of America into the socialist state that had been forecast by Barack Obama as he was about to win the presidency in 2008. Donald Trump's election as president in 2016 accelerated the rate at which the Democratic Party has openly embraced socialism, along with a disdain for the Constitution and the rule of law that has emboldened them with, quote, a higher loyalty, end quote, that over human history has been deemed treason when their efforts to remove the head of state fail. Robert Mueller's downfall. In writing my 2018 New York Times best-selling book entitled Killing the Deep State, The Fight to Save President Trump, I predicted that Robert Mueller's investigation as special counsel would fail to produce probable cause evidence proving that Trump or anyone in his campaign had colluded with Russia, or that Trump had obstructed justice by interfering in the special counsel's investigation. That has now happened. Mueller produced no evidence that resulted in a criminal indictment of any American for colluding with Russia in the 2016 presidential campaign. The various indictments of Trump associates that Mueller produced were either for tax fraud, as in Paul Manafort's case, or for lying to federal investigators, as in the case of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn and others, including George Papadopoulos. The two indictments Mueller brought against Russians involved no Americans. The irony is that if Hillary Clinton had won the 2016 election, none of the deep state actors involved in the treasonous coup d'etat would ever have come to light. Had Clinton been inaugurated as president on January 20th, 2017, Donald Trump most likely would have been allowed to return to his Trump Tower home to live life as a celebrity billionaire. With Clinton in power, the co-conspirators of the 2016 coup d'etat could feel comfortable that their treasonous plot would never be brought to justice. Put simply, those supporting Hillary Clinton, as well as Clinton herself, never imagined that she would lose. August 28, 2018. The day my life changed. In my 2019 bestseller, Silent No More, How I Became a Political Prisoner of Mueller's Witch Hunt, I document my nightmare experience with the Mueller prosecutors and the FBI agents on his team. When Mueller's team finally blew up my 2-month ordeal of suffering through 40 hours of, quote, voluntary interviews, unquote, the prosecutors threatened to indict me for lying to federal officials. After the FBI showed up on my doorstep with a subpoena on August 28, 2018, 3 days before my 72nd birthday, I resolved that since I had done nothing wrong, I would cooperate. Voluntarily, I handed over to the FBI the laptop computers I had been using since 2016, as well as all my external drive backup devices, plus all the usernames and passwords to my email accounts and my cell phone. Truthfully, I believe the FBI already had all the information I handed over. Every aspect of my life was in those computers, my cell phone, my email accounts, ranging from personal relations with family to business consulting information and financial records. The IRS began auditing me in 2004 when I co-authored the Swiftboat book, Unfit for Command, Swiftboat Veterans Speak Out Against John Kerry. That book contributed to Kerry losing the 2004 presidential election against then-President George W. Bush, who was running for his second term in office. Fortunately, my wife and I have always had highly competent and honest tax accountants, and we have meticulously reported all income and paid all taxes due. We have no foreign bank accounts, and I have never worked for any foreign government. I now believe that I was a target of the FBI's illegal electronic surveillance, approved by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, especially given my working relationship during the 2016 campaign reporting on and working with Roger Stone. I suspect I have been under National Security Agency, NSA, electronic surveillance since 2004, when I co-authored Unfit for Command and worked on the Swiftboat campaign opposing the presidential candidacy of then-Senator John Kerry. The three prosecutors on Mueller's team who interrogated me, Aaron Zelinsky, Jeannie Rhee, and Andrew Goldstein, the former chief of the Public Corruption Unit under U.S. Attorney Pret Bahara's office for the Southern District of New York, seemed to know everything about me, including the content of my cell phone calls. Mueller's faulty theory exposed. Mueller's entire Russian collusion case came down to proving that I had introduced Julian Assange of WikiLeaks to Roger Stone, a longtime advisor to Donald Trump. Mueller's theory was that I had introduced Stone to Assange and that Stone, in telephone contact with Trump, colluded with Assange as to how and when to release the emails Russia had stolen from the Democrats so as to do the most harm to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. The problem was that I had never communicated with Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. The lead prosecutor interrogating me was Jeannie Rhee, a lawyer who had served as legal counsel for the Clinton Foundation. Rhee demeaned my religion. Quote, Dr. Corsi, you are asking us to believe that in July 2016, when you took a trip to Italy with your wife for your 25th wedding anniversary, God intervened and performed a miracle in your mind, telling you Assange had John Podesta's emails, she said in an angry voice. I responded that I did not appreciate her ridiculing God, but that if she was asking if I had figured out on my own in July and August 2016 that Assange had Podesta's emails, the answer was direct and honest. Quote, yes, I figured it out without any communication with Julian Assange or with WikiLeaks, end quote. What concerned the FBI in the Mueller investigation can be traced back to a family trip my wife and I took in July and August 2016 to celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary. On that trip, relaxing from the demands of everyday writing, I had time to think. Of all things, I concluded that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks had obtained the emails stolen from Podesta, Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign chairman. I further deduced that Assange would make these emails public in October 2016 as that year's, quote, October surprise, end quote, calculated to hit Clinton's presidential campaign with a death blow. The first batch of stolen emails Assange had released on July 22, 2016, focusing on then Democratic National Committee chairperson Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the plan she implemented with Hillary Clinton to deny Bernie Sanders the Democratic presidential nomination. Soon after that, Assange let it be known he had additional, quote, Clinton emails, end quote, to release. But it was not known what additional emails Assange had or when he would make them public. I connected the dots and deduced, or perhaps I just guessed and was lucky, But I was sure on my Italy trip that the additional stolen emails that Assange possessed were Podesta's emails. I also reasoned that Assange would release the Podesta emails in October because that timing would not give Hillary time to recover, especially if Assange dripped out the emails, releasing them in a serial fashion, a few emails every day, right up until the November 6th election. I've been studying Podesta and Assange for some dozen years in my work as an investigative journalist. From what I knew of Podesta, I firmly believed that if I was right, and WikiLeaks published the Podesta emails in October 2016, they would be extremely damaging to Clinton's presidential ambitions. By phone and email, I conveyed my conclusions from Italy to many people, including Stone. Although I had no proof, I was absolutely certain I was right. Knowing I could not prove I was right or even explain to others how I came to this conclusion, I wrote several emails that made it sound as if I had a source. From the time I was a child, my father would counsel me to tell him when I came to conclusions regarding facts I could not prove, but he advised me not to share these insights with others at school. Often in my life, my leaps of intuition, or what I think are conclusions derived from a process of deduction, have turned out to be good guesses that have been surprisingly on target and correct, as they were in July and August 2016. My personal experience with Mueller's team gave me important insight into the mean political bias that pervaded every aspect of Mueller's investigation. In my 40 hours of interrogation, Mueller's team showed no interest in anything except finding a crime that Trump had committed. Repeatedly, the prosecutors refused information I had about Clinton. Quote, "Dr. Corsi, we are uninterested in your theories that the Russians did not steal the DNC emails," end quote, Mueller's prosecutors insisted. Or on a separate subject, they were equally insistent. Quote, "Please spare us your research on Huma Abedin's forwarding Hillary Clinton's classified emails from the State Department to her personal email account on Yahoo," end quote. Judging from the questions Mueller's prosecutors asked me, I concluded that the FBI, and very possibly the NSA, had monitored my emails and phone calls while I was in Italy with my wife and family. Mueller's prosecutors told my attorney, David Gray, that the FBI was convinced I must have had direct contact with Assange because I appeared to have known all about Assange having Podesta's emails while I was in Italy. The information I was communicating from Italy about Assange and Podesta's emails turned out to be so precisely correct that the FBI was convinced that I could not have come to these conclusions by myself. Mueller's prosecutors pointed out to David Gray that when I was in Italy during July and August 2016, I predicted correctly that the stolen Podesta emails would contain admissions by Podesta that Clinton was suffering from some form of mental impairment that made her far more ill than her campaign was willing to admit publicly. I was predicting the Podesta emails would contain damaging information about Clinton Foundation frauds, as well as internal DNC grumbling that Hillary was a disappointing candidate. While I have attended, as part of the audience, various public meetings Podesta has chaired in Washington, D.C., I have never spoken to Podesta, nor have I communicated with him by phone or email. In my 40 hours of questioning, the three prosecutors and the FBI became increasingly aggressive and abusive, refusing to accept my explanation that I never had any contact with Assange or WikiLeaks either directly or indirectly. Mueller's team simply refused to believe I was sufficiently smart to have figured this out myself. I expressed this predicament after Mueller submitted his final report in an op-ed piece entitled "When Prescience Was a Crime," that I published in the Washington Times. I rejected what I considered a fraudulent plea deal Mueller's prosecutors had prepared for me to sign. The prosecutors threatened to bring criminal indictments against me in federal court, seeking to imprison me for the rest of my life. The truth is, Mueller ended his investigation without bringing any charges against me. The only way I would have gone to prison is if Mueller had managed to scare me into pleading guilty to a crime I did not commit. Mueller's prosecutors knew I had committed no crime, but they desperately needed me to plead guilty, admitting I had connected Stone to Assange, even though that was not true. I refused to go before a federal judge and swear before God to a crime I had not committed. Failing to get this key piece of, quote, evidence, end quote, from me, Mueller lacked a critical piece needed to complete the preconceived Russian collusion hoax. William Barr shuts Mueller down. On Friday, March 22, 2019, Attorney General William Barr notified Congress that Special Counsel Robert Mueller had submitted the final report of his investigation to Barr's office. 2 days later, on Sunday, March 24th, in a 4-page letter addressed to Congress, Barr summarized the conclusions of Mueller's investigation into Russian collusion into the following 2 simple points. Number 1, the special counsel's investigation do not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired or coordinated with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 election. Number 2, the special counsel did not draw a conclusion one way or the other as to whether the examined conduct constituted obstruction. Given Mueller's inability to draw a conclusion on the collusion allegations, Barr took the matter into his own hands. In his March 24, 2019 letter to Congress, Barr wrote that the special counsel's decision not to draw any legal conclusions left the decision up to him as Attorney General to determine whether the conduct described in Mueller's 500-page report constituted probable cause that a crime had been committed. Once again, Barr stated his conclusion simply and clearly. Quote, after reviewing the special counsel's final report on these issues, consulting with department officials, including the Office of Legal Counsel, and applying the principles of federal prosecution that guide our charging decisions, Deputy Attorney General Rod J. Rosenstein and I have concluded that the evidence developed during the special counsel's investigation is not sufficient to establish that the president committed an obstruction of justice offense, end quote. Almost immediately, President Trump began expressing his satisfaction with these conclusions. On Sunday, March 24, 2019, at 3:42 p.m., Trump tweeted a message that made it clear he considered that Barr's summary of the Mueller report had completely removed from him the cloud of any criminal charges. Trump's tweet read, quote, no collusion, no obstruction, complete and total exoneration. Keep America great, end quote. Barr's 4-page letter set off a firestorm. Starting during the 2016 presidential campaign, CNN and MSNBC had begun a daily drumbeat, hyping every tidbit of new information suggesting that Trump had colluded with Russia, turning every scrap of gossip into near certain proof that Trump was a Russian asset who stole the election from Hillary. 24 hours a day, the Russian collusion hype was promoted by leftist talk show hosts and guests alike. If Barr's summary of Mueller's report was accurate, never-Trumpers had spent approximately the past 2 years depicting Trump as a traitor on the basis of supposition, rumor, and innuendo. Millions were hooked into the Russian collusion hysteria, only to be left sadly disappointed by Barr's conclusion that Mueller had found no evidence of collusion with Russia and insufficient.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?